Viola Drath, an accomplished writer and political advisor, trying to adjust to life as a widow after 40 years of marriage.
One of the things that jumped out at me about this case was that Viola Drath did not want to be alone. People prey on that.
Alrech Moot, a charismatic enigma claiming to be a European nobleman and a high-ranking soldier.
He was a very accomplished career con man. He was very successful in his cons early on. Then they would begin to fall apart because he couldn't quite hold them together.
And for her to have died the way she did, it was something that this city had never seen before.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Georgetown, a neighborhood of Washington, D.C. The upper crust, the political, and the upscale live in this fashionable area of historic row houses and shops. But on a pleasant summer day, one couple played out the final chapter in their marriage. The wife lay dead on the bathroom floor, and the husband would spend years counterpunching against every police effort to find her killer.
This was called in to 911 by a gentleman named Alrech Moot, M-U-T-H, as a natural death.
His wife, Viola Drath, was 91 years old. So could she have died from natural causes?
He said he came into the home, went straight to bed, wakes up the next morning and his wife is dead on the bathroom floor. He said it was the product of an apparent fall, where maybe she bumped her head or had a cardiac event.
The D.C. Metropolitan Police dispatched a special unit called the Natural Squad to examine the corpse.
This is the squad of detectives that go out and look at the crime scene, look at the victim, look at the circumstances, and try to make a determination whether this was a suspicious death or obviously a natural death where you really don't need police involvement.
The body in the bathroom raised too many red flags to label this as death from old age. The row house became the crime scene for a homicide with a victim who was very well known.
Viola Drath was legendary here in Washington, D.C.
She was a playwright, an author, a journalist of some note. She was on some White House boards and commissions. She was starting the D.C. chapter of the Blue Star Families, supporting parents who had children, adult children who were in combat in the military.
She hobnobbed with members of the White House and Supreme Court justices, ambassadors from various countries, actors and actresses.
Widowed when she was in her mid-60s, Viola Drath hoped to find love again. 4 years later, she remarried, but her new husband was something of a mystery.
What I was trying to figure out very early on, like within the first 48 to 72 hours when I was on this fresh murder case, was who in the world is Viola Drath's husband, Alrech Moot. I didn't have any information that he wasn't who he was purporting to be.
Except what he purported to be was a general in the army of Iraq.
He walked around in this military uniform all year long, even in the summer, a heavy uniform, even in the summer, with a baton. Some people call it a riding crop or something, but he always called it a baton. He wore an eye patch that oftentimes would go from one eye to the next eye, depending on the day.
Clipped speech and a military posture completed the effect.
He was very eccentric. He would talk in that staccato German accent. And he was known in that neighborhood as being, there go that Moot guy. Everyone knew him. Everybody knew where he lived and who he was married to.
And who he was married to raised some eyebrows in the neighborhood. Why did the classy and sophisticated Viola Drath choose a husband who seemed a bit off-kilter?
He was very charismatic. He was 40 years younger than Miss Drath, and she fell for him.
She had known him before her first husband passed, but he became much more of a regular companion, notwithstanding the dramatic age difference after her husband passed away.
That's when Alrech Moot then moved in her life, I should say, and showed up with a rose on her doorstep, began visiting her on numerous occasions, would play the piano for her, would cook for her, would serve as her chauffeur, serve as her cook, would serve as her secretary, and he would dote on her.
In addition to being a soldier in the Foreign Army, Alrech Moot appeared to be a hopeless romantic. But he also carried many secrets that would cause problems in his marriage to Viola Drath, secrets that may have contributed to her death years later.
When this tragedy happened, a lot of people who knew her and saw her and Alrech Moot together immediately suspected Alrech Moot was behind this.
Morning in Georgetown, a ritzy area of the nation's capital. Detectives investigating the sudden passing of Viola Drath had serious doubts about her husband, whose worldliness and noble air didn't quite ring true.
He was able to be in any type of setting, whether it's on Congress, whether it's the White House, Supreme Court justices. He was able to move and study a person, study the surroundings, and able to have a dialogue with those individuals because he was a ferocious reader. He loved to read, and he was able to digest and take in things. And because of that, he was able to have conversations of just about any subject.
The murder of Viola Drath was more than a strange case of homicide. It was also a story about the human condition and those who take advantage of it. Case in point, a grieving widow.
Now, this was also a very important time for her when she was grieving the loss of her husband. Her adult children were out of the house, her adult grandchildren, they all had their own lives. And so she was very much afraid of being alone. And Alrech Moot moved in and sort of took advantage, if you will, of her feeling of not wanting to be alone. And he made sure that she was never alone.
To find and prosecute Viola Drath's killer, the Department of Justice tapped Glenn Kirshner, an assistant U.S. attorney based in Washington, D.C. So after you looked at the crime scene, did Moot's story about his wife falling and hitting her head seem to make sense?
It wasn't long before we realized that the crime scene, their home on Q Street, had no forced entry. Everything was secured, doors and windows from the inside. There was nothing taken, ransacked, out of place.
Did Moot continue to maintain he had nothing to do with her death?
The story that he was peddling to the detectives who were interviewing him, first as a potential witness whose spouse had just been found dead in the bathroom, then as a person of interest as he morphed into a suspect, and ultimately as a defendant. The story Moot was peddling to the detectives was that, he went out the evening before, his wife was fine.
So what happened after Alrech Moot went out for the evening? Sometimes the best sources of information are the people who live right next door.
Anytime there's a death, police will do a canvass of all of the surrounding homes to try to see if anybody heard anything, saw anything, or knew the victim, knew the suspect, Alrech Moot. And we learned some interesting things from the neighbors.
The news media made its rounds as well. Reporter Keith Alexander of the Washington Post knocked on a few doors to gather details.
He was considered an eccentric neighbor. No one thought he was dangerous, but they always thought he was weird and quite full of himself.
To say they viewed Alrech Moot as somewhat eccentric is perhaps an understatement. He would put on his Iraqi general uniform. He would, stroll around the streets of Georgetown, smoking a cigar, sometimes with a walking stick. He wouldn't really engage all that much with the neighbors, but they had the sense that it was not a good relationship between Alrech Moot and his now deceased wife, Viola.
They say walls can talk, and this was especially true in Washington amongst the neighbors of Viola Drath and Alrech Moot.
These are very expensive row houses, historic row houses in Washington, D.C., so the walls are connected, one home to another. Some of those walls are paper thin. They would hear sometimes, angry confrontations, arguments, yelling.
So what did the family of Viola Drath reveal to you about Moot's behavior immediately after his wife's death?
Viola Drath's family came to the house. He presented Viola Drath's daughter with a letter, allegedly, that Viola Drath had written, in which she promised Albert Moot $200,000 if anything were to happen to her. A letter that, according to the family, was forged.
The most interesting conversation I had was probably with Viola Drath's grandson. He said, Glenn, my step-grandfather is basically a career con man who has taken over a series of personalities over time. There was one point in time when Alrech Moot was wearing an eye patch and peddling a story that he was a mercenary in South America and lost an eye, protecting a dignitary. And then weeks later, all of a sudden, the eye patch is gone, and I guess his eye got better.
What did you learn about him portraying himself as part of European nobility and wanting to be addressed as Count Albrecht?
What we began to learn was that he would take on a series of personas. He was a play actor, and he would then exploit those personas to whatever advantage he could. Sometimes it was financial, but often it was social. He was trying to sort of build this image of himself with various people that he would interact with.
Although her husband's chameleon-like behavior helped to sustain their active social life amongst VIPs in Washington, behind the doors of their home, Viola Drath was suffering in silence.
I think folks would describe him as an alcoholic, and he got very nasty when he was intoxicated. Sometimes he took it out on his wife with physical abuse, some of which was documented by the police over the years.
This appeared to be two people locked together in a dance that had no rhythm and no music.
Alrech Moot and Viola Drath had what they called a marriage of convenience, which was more about companionship, and some people even said Moot would act as her butler at times, and she would pay him $2,000 a month. He never really was gainfully employed. He kind of lived off her both financially and socially. I call it living off her Rolodex, because she was very accomplished in Washington, D.C. circles.
So if she did feel like her husband was taking advantage of her, some wondered why she continued to stay in the relationship.
What I believe Alrech Moot did with his wife's body was take it by the shoulders and drag it into the bathroom, laid her down on the bathroom floor, ramrod straight, to try to make it look like perhaps she had suffered some kind of a health event, cardiac event, fell on the bathroom floor and died.
There were only two people in this Georgetown row house on a hot August night, and one of them was dead. The other, Alrech Moot, insisted that his wife's death was accidental.
He said he came into the home, went straight to bed, wakes up the next morning and his wife is dead on the bathroom floor. He said it was the product of an apparent fall, where maybe she bumped her head or had a cardiac event, but what we learned from the autopsy was that Viola Drath had been murdered.
What did the autopsy reveal about the condition of the body?
She had bilateral rib fractures up and down her chest, as if somebody had been straddling her, placing a significant amount of pressure on her. She had a broken hyoid bone, which is a delicate bone in the human throat, which when somebody is manually strangled, often it becomes fractured. It's a telltale sign of manual strangulation. She had a thumbnail completely ripped off as if during a struggle.
Police say it was quite possible that Alrech Moot had beaten his wife to death. She had put up with a lot over the years.
One of the things that's so very sad about this case is that there were early signs of verbal and physical abuse. She took out restraining orders against him, but she would never follow through.
But the authorities were catching up with Alrech Moot. The U.S. Attorney's Office arrested him and sent him to Superior Court. Accused of murdering his wife, Moot insisted that he was innocent.
But did you kill him?
I did not kill my wife.
You did not kill your wife?
No. Am I under suspicion?
Well, I just have is this just
That is a
you?
legal question. Am I a suspect? Of course I'm a suspect. That's correct.
I mean, is this you and your wife at home?
Yes.
And your wife ends up murdered?
Yes, I can think so. Good. What do we do?
Given the evidence against him, Moot changed his tune.
His story then changed from that she fell to it was a hit. Iran put a hit out on his wife, and that his wife was a victim of assassination. So that was his defense. Prosecutors obviously did not buy any of that.
Before and during the trial, prosecutors tried to prevent the defendant from turning the proceedings into a circus. But police say Moot was an expert ringmaster.
We managed to defeat his claim that he was not competent to stand trial because he was suffering from a delusional disorder that really made him believe he was an Iraqi general. And then once we overcame that obstacle that he tried to throw up, he decided his next attempt to avoid going to trial would be to starve himself into incapacitation.
Frail from lack of food, Moot communicated from a horizontal position, lying in a hospital bed.
We had to have him evaluated by mental health experts, forensic psychologists, and he hired his own forensic psychiatrists and psychologists, and we had what we referred to as the battle of the experts, and we litigated the longest running competency hearing in the history of the DC courts, according to the judge who presided.
But even with all his drama, the jury wasn't buying it.
Once we were in trial, he was convicted handily of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances because the nature of the crime was cruel, atrocious, and heinous, which is an aggravating circumstance under DC law, and his wife was especially vulnerable given her age, which is another aggravating circumstance. The judge sentenced him on the first-degree murder conviction to 50 years in prison.
One more mystery in this bizarre story: why did Alrech Moot kill his wife? He had no inheritance, no benefits if Viola Drath passed away, and they were 20 years into their marriage. And police say on that fateful August night, Viola Drath suffered her husband's wrath once again, except this time, she wouldn't survive. Was it a marriage of love, companionship, or convenience? Both Viola Drath and Alrech Moot made critical decisions that eventually destroyed their relationship. Her choice to stay no matter what, his choice to use her until it no longer mattered. And now it is time for today's Safety Spotlight. Senior citizens may be more vulnerable to victimization and abuse. Almost 50% of reported cases of elder abuse are perpetrated by a family member. A victim may fear that if they report their loved one, that person may go to prison and leave them without care. In some cases, a senior may be too embarrassed or ashamed to report abuse. Other victims may fear retaliation from their caregiver. In these cases, it is crucial for loved ones or professionals to recognize signs of abuse and report it. To report elder abuse, call 911 or reach out to your local adult protective services. For all of us here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.